and welcome to the First Issue Club podcast. We're your weekly comic book reading club. We're just like Sue Storm. We love a good read. Hey, oh my gosh, we're back again, and we've got a ton to talk about this week. Comic books, first and foremost. We love onboarding you into freaky new stories that you're going to love. You're going to disappear into these wild, kinky adventures.
Into a world of make-believe and tie-up.
I tell you what, this is going to help you sleep at night. You get to say, what if I was the person that had the magic things happen to me? And then you go to slumberland happy with a smile on your face.
Mm-hmm.
I do that.
But
I used to do that all the time when I was a little kid. Pretend I was, think about whether I was Spider-Man, or if I woke up as Spider-Man, like how would my life be different? And
so you tried to preemptively get yourself to have a Spider-Man dream?
Yeah, like try to incept my dreams by thinking about that as I went to sleep.
Okay, I hope you brought a totem, or else you may still be in that dream.
Get lost forever.
Because I don't want to frighten you, but my dream as a little boy was to be a mid-tier podcast host about comic books.
Podcasts weren't even a thing yet.
I'm living it. I called them radio shows back then.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, goofabouts.
All right, so we've got a lot of comics we're going to talk about and hopefully onboard you, introduce you into something new. We're talking about Napalm Lullaby, I Heart Skull Crusher, Little Black Book, Helen of Wyndhorn, and Black Widow and Hawkeye. So we've got a smorgasbord of first issues. One of probably the biggest title we're not talking about today is that Dylan Dog Batman comic.
Oh yes,
Batman for the Brits, old UK Batman.
Batman across the pond, if you will.
I will. So I think a lot of people are a lot of people are probably covering that book this week because it was one of the bigger releases. But we're not talking about it.
Nah, we got the nitty gritty here.
Okay, so news-wise, we're also talking about some big things that happened today as of this recording, and then a couple other things from earlier in the week. We've got some accusations of AI, which is always a hot topic in comics, and then a ton of X-Men news. So we'll get to that shortly. But first, me, Greg, and Vargas, who is unfortunately under the weather today, get well soon. Third co-host, lowest-ranking co-host. First,
hey, newest.
Now that you're gone, you fall to the bottom of the
you got a demerit.
Pole.
Gold sticker taken from the chart.
But the three of us had a kick-ass Planet Comicon, courtesy of a booth in collaboration with our good friends at Boulevard, as I'm sipping my Space Camper Cosmic IPA, the new Quantum Hop IPA, which is a higher ABV varietal of our sponsor beer. So shout out to them, not only for sponsoring the podcast, but bringing us along for fun stuff like this to do like a cool activation at their booth. Do you want to talk about it a little, Greg?
Yeah, so our partnership with Boulevard has gone back for about 5 years now, and it's been very successful for us. I don't know so much about Boulevard Brewing Company, but we have benefited from it vastly.
Right.
We've got to spread the good news about Space Camper and talk about comic books all at the same time. We did something a little different this year at Planet Comicon. We came up with a comic book clairvoyant tarot reading booth. So what we did was we basically thought of genres and different kinds of subjects to help you and guide you into maybe not your first comic book, but definitely your next favorite comic book. And we had a lot of great choices there. It was, not to toot my own horn here, but it was a hit. I've gotten from many sources that are from Planet and from outside of Planet. It was the most popular booth at Planet Comicon. They are looking to trademark it, but joke's on them. We already trademarked it and copywritten it, so we are safe there legally. But we had a great time. I mean, we had people like Jason Aaron stopping by the booth. We had people like CB Sobalski stopping by the booth to play our little game. We had the VP of Boulevard Brewing Company themselves stop by and do our tarot. I mean, it was a smash hit. I'm surprised we didn't get a comic book deal out of it, to be honest.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The basics of the thing were we walk through that tarot card deck, navigating your pop culture preferences on choices we give you, and then that ends up giving you a comic book recommendation based on your combination of preferences, right?
Right.
And I think the collaboration with Boulevard specifically was perfect for this because you've got nerds in the nerd nest who already know what comics they love and what things they want to get signed, and they're in their one part of the convention hall.
Right.
And then there's this other part of the convention hall where Boulevard is set up that's a little more like, we've got video games, we've got beer sampling, we've got like all these
gutters,
other,
we
like,
have army recruitment.
all your favorite con stops.
Yeah.
God, I don't get me started on the army recruitment. I'll just say
predatory, not good.
So predatory, especially for a group of people. And I guess I'm speaking for myself as someone who used to go to cons as like a young person, but very impressionable and awkward and had a hard time saying no, easily bullied. Yeah. I think these people know this and target us little like weak nerd and bully us into joining the army. So
I would rather my high school bully actually be there, hunting me down like a predator, than like the army.
I hate that stuff. And when I went to LA Comicon a little while back, and they had this like VR booth that looked like it was a video game thing, and before you know it, you're sitting down with a guy talking about enrolling. Yeah. So shitty.
He was telling you were actually piloting a real drone.
A real drone.
And you were taking out, camps out.
As easy as that, man.
Yeah. And you did it. Blood's on your hand. Might as well sign up.
Here's your $5 paycheck.
Welcome to the army.
Oh, God. What a tangent. But to my point, I think this area of the convention hall was perfect for us because we got to do some outreach to people who were comic book curious, I think.
I love that term. I'm so glad you said it.
They're really into going to the con and excited about like people watching and seeing what's going on, and they love pop culture stuff, but they maybe aren't initiated in comics. Like that was a lot of people who came up to the booth were like, I haven't bought a comic in like 10 years, or like I've actually never bought a comic book for me before, so this would be like my first comic. And people seemed really open to the idea after us spending some time like working on their preferences with them and explaining why we picked the book we picked for them and giving a quick plot synopsis. A lot of people like made very sincere eye contact and were like, I will check this out. Like
some very heavy EC
this is
going
cool.
on.
Yeah, that's right, which I always appreciate.
Yeah.
So big shout out to Boulevard, and specifically the Space Camper section of Boulevard, which is kind of their nerd line of beers and a really good tasting IPA that's out and about in the country. So check them out if you can. They're a cool brewery that supports cool nerd shit, and they support your First Issue Club comic book podcast by letting us do cool shit that enables us to meet CB Cebulski and
Jason Aaron.
Do a fun tarot game with them.
Yeah. So I'll say, all in all, great convention. We talk about it more over on the Patreon. So if you want to go to patreon.com/firstissueclub, we do a full breakdown of Planet Comicon there. But, I mean, this year, the 25th anniversary, they really brought the heavy hitters as far as talent goes for movies and comics and anything in between. And
can I say, I was so stoked to get Jim Mahfood did a remark of I had a Howard the Duck blank cover that's got a handful of small sketches on it.
Yes, it does.
And he did a comic called Howard the Human a while back, which was like an alternate universe. What if Howard the Duck was a human? And he drew Howard the Human on that comic for me.
The story you told us about the exchange with him was hilarious because you walked up to him and you go, "Do you do remarks?" And he goes, "I do now." And he just whipped something up for you.
His thing was, well, he's like famous for doing these like intricate ballpoint pen drawings where he like barely picks up his pen and he just goes like edge to edge and connects the dots, and before you know it, he's made this like piece of art. And it's so impressive watching him do it in person. It's like wild. And then two, to just like put the pen down and knowing like I'm barely going to pick this thing up and it's going to turn into this by the end of it is so cool to me. So he only charged $20. He was like, does $20 sound good? And I was like, yeah.
I'll get a couple.
You know, you know what people are charging now for like way smaller remarks. So he was really cool, and that made my con. So I just wanted to shout out that he's a cool guy, and you can maybe get if he's got time in his day or doesn't have a huge line. Yeah. He's somebody who can do something really. You
gotta sweet talk them. These creators, you gotta come up to them right. You gotta approach them. Not as a subhuman, just like with 80 comics in tow, waiting to get signed.
It could be one of those things that helped that I was like, I came and was like, would you do a Howard the Duck or Howard the Human? And Howard the Human was like an obscure one-shot that he did for a character he created, right?
Right.
And not a lot of people probably come up to him mentioning that, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that, like, those little things, I think that show you're a big fan of somebody aren't only for your own delight. It's, like, really great to come locked and loaded with, like, here's this obscure thing of yours that I'm, like, a mega fan of.
Yeah.
But, like, and having that moment for yourself. But I think it's also fun for them and lets people know that you're just, like, not going to hawk this thing on eBay the second you get home, which always makes people funner to talk to, and if they know that that's not what's going on.
I would say every interaction we had the whole weekend was superb. Like, not a bad interaction. Everyone was in high spirits. The weather was very nice, so I think that helped. Sunshine was out and about. I just think it was a great con, a great success. It was very nice that it happened on Planet Comicon's 25th anniversary. I'm sure they were stressing with the weather and stuff and attendance, but from everything that I've seen and everything that I saw there, it was a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, it was great. I had a great time. Let's get into the non-personal news. I know everybody loves to keep up with how good of a time we're having on the weekend.
Always a great time.
Let's get into some of the comic book stuff like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, and we're going to start with the accusations of Andrea Sorrentino using AI-created art in the most recent Batman series that's being written by Chip Zdarsky, issue 143. Right. In particular, features a handful of very painterly-looking scenes that have some of the hallmarks of AI-created art. Thoughts, opinions, extra context or setup on that I missed, Greg?
No, you got it in one, Mike, as you usually do, because you're a fucking pro. But the allegations come from a gentleman named James from Twitter who either got a copy of some pre-release stuff or like some press releases that he saw the artwork and DC hasn't come out and said that the AI art had been used. This user is alleging.
DC has said officially that they are investigating it.
Sure, yes.
I looked into this, and they do have an official long-standing policy that all artwork must be the artist's original work. And I'm sure this long-standing policy wasn't created with artificial intelligence-generated art in mind. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, it probably still serves the same purpose, and keeping AI art out of comic books is probably in the spirit of this rule still.
Yeah.
Or policy.
And nothing has been definitively said, yes or no, whether Sorrentino had used AI art, so I'm not going to comment on whether it is or isn't. I think the broader conversation is that AI art finally has arrived in the conversation between Marvel and DC and alleged being used in like a mass market scenario. And I just want to state here, it should not be in comic books. AI is, people want to argue, is it stolen art? Well, it doesn't matter if it's stolen art or not. It is a computer used software to mimic and to pull from already pre-existing works to create an image. Now, this isn't like you or I being inspired by art or like doing life drawings and like drawing from real life. This is very homogenized and cold, pixelated reconstructions of images, and it's gross and it's uninspired.
And I worry too about the lazification.
No, I mean, honestly,
if
yes.
I may, of the minds of potential would-be amazing artists.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a handful of companies that are embracing AI right now, and their AI art specifically is what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And they are making it so can get your hands on or upload a script and have AI generate your full comic, and they publish it to a platform and then maintain some of the rights in exchange for using their particular AI editor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think these are the sort of things that as a young person, you have an idea and you want to realize that idea. And this is a quick and fast way to have a product that looks maybe more elevated than you would be able to deliver with traditional skills on your own because you haven't developed those yet.
Mm-hmm.
But the more young people lean on these things, the more and more we're going to lose talent. And
Mm-hmm.
you're not, I think, and this is the thing that I think about all the time too, is that yes, there are some comic book styles that are a bit homogenized, but how many times in a generation do we have like a Trad Moore?
Right.
Or somebody who just like, or an Ian Bertram. Like there's so many examples. I could just go on and on. But somebody who just like breaks the foundation of what a comic book looks like and has a huge fan base and following because of their unique style. Daniel Warren Johnson, someone who has a massive, massive following right now.
Right.
Like, think about the young versions of those people right now who aren't enabling themselves to create because they've got a shortcut. And I think those are the longer term repercussions of AI art that gross me out the most. And the more you've got current creators enabling its use, the more acceptable it is for up and comers to do the same thing, or the more acceptable it may be to have publishers say, we're having more production artists do this. We'll have AI generate the comic book, and then we'll have production artists come in and clean it up. And that's not the world any of us want to live in or support as fans of art and creation and storytelling. It's just like sickening, I think.
Yeah. I think you're right with the new term that we just coined, lazification. Like you're skipping the process, and that's where a lot of artists find themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's tough to draw. No one's going to dispute that. It's a little easier for some than others. But when you skip that step of the process of learning your style and learning the basics, and you find that shortcut and you're just like, oh, this is way easier, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing the comic book community a disservice, because, you know, I don't agree that, you know, you make better content with, you know, AI because it's like a one and done thing. It's like it's a, you know, a fast track to making a book. Like, who's to say that like Watchmen would have been completely different with AI? There may have been different stories, or characters would have looked different. Like, the process of making something is where you learn what the product is and like what at its core is about. So if we skip those important steps, we lose the the validity and the importance of the product that we're intaking.
And I think particularly in comics is like the spirit of comics is so punk rock to me.
Mm-hmm.
And
AI is so fucking corporate.
And AI is so opposite of that. And how much of it is like the romance of the process and doing things traditionally. Like the idea of losing that in comics specifically just kills me.
Yeah. You're never going to impress anyone that you're trying to like woo or romance, being just like, hey, look at this AI image I had prompted for you. It's you and me holding hands. It's just like, ugh. Like, what? Like, why are my eyes like that? What happened to my hand? And it's just like, oh, well, the AI is still learning. It's just like, just learn it. It's cool. And like, that's why people learn to play the guitar or like learn to do anything. It's fun to use your hands and get in the process and do that.
And to reinforce my point again from earlier, how many people who end up being like auteurs in the medium or go on to do other things find their footing in their creativity or their voice or their style in comic books because it's such an accessible way to be creative and put it out into the world.
Right.
Like a comic book is a 32-page thing. Even on a smaller scale, you can go to a Chicago Comics and it's filled in the back with zines that are like cut in half, Xeroxed copies. And some of the things that I've bought at Chicago Comics for 99 cents have been some of the most like beautiful, heartbreaking like creations, and any person can wake up, put a pen to paper, and make something that resonates with people and find themselves and who they are as a storyteller. And I really believe that this generation of AI is going to rip that from young people's hands because they're just going to look at what AI can do in 10 seconds and what they can do in 10 seconds. And the idea of how beautiful the raw creation is from them with pen and paper is going to be lost on people moving forward. So, yeah, I just think there's no place for this in modern comics as a point of inspiration or just like I think we've got to put our foot down as a community of people that are interested in the industry and say, no, that this doesn't happen here. Yep. I'm saying, like a lot of people and a lot of creators use a lot of reference photography. And I think that's part of being an artist is that as you're learning body form or like a lot of comic book creators are under such tight deadlines that maybe we lean on references from old comics we love or sports photography, and someone sprinting in a sports photo gets like redrawn as Psylocke in an X-Men comic.
Sure.
Like that stuff happens. And I think that's part of any artist process. And maybe there's a world wherein you can say, hey, AI, spin up 10 versions of this for me. And that might help you find a composition that keeps your workflow working fast. I think that's a different distinction than putting in a prompt and then publishing that.
Like, yeah, but like I was going to say, like AI itself, the software, isn't making a reference photo. It's like making like a ransom note of other people's artwork into a compilation.
Sure.
And to pass it off, and the gross thing is to have a creator pass it off as their own unique piece of art is fucked.
Yeah.
Because you didn't do shit. You wrote a sentence.
Yeah, you're a professional prompt writer.
And ones and zeros wrote that out for you. I don't care if you went back in with Photoshop and cleaned it up. You're a fucking hack.
Yeah.
Like, anyone can do that. And if anyone can do it, it's not special.
Yep. All this to say, alleged at this point, but it's a good time to have this conversation again and talk about what it means for the medium specifically. You know, we could talk about AI all day and its implications on other industries and whether it should or should not be used in all manner of respects. But I think this in particular is just a good.
It's pretty clear here
to get people talking. You think it's pretty obvious that that was AI?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's pretty clear that AI should never be used in comic books.
Yeah.
Illustrating or writing, because we can get into discussion too about, Chat GPT or whatever writing scripts for comics. Yeah, let's not even go there yet. But, if you support AI, you support Skynet. That's all I'm saying.
And I think this is the thing about looking at a Hallmark movie, which is extremely formulaic, cookie
romantic,
cutter,
beautiful
story versus, movies like Poor Things. AI would never write Poor Things. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we want those sort of things in our lives, even though it's not what you want all the time. You gotta save creativity and defend it to make sure that things still exist like this.
Yeah.
All right.
We can get off. I have more thoughts, but I need to move on
we'll
from
never,
this. It's
we'll
ridiculous.
never stop if we don't force ourselves to move on to the next thing. So the biggest topic in comics this week is X-Men. From the Ashes is what it's been called recently, which is reference to, I think, Krakoa burning down and seeing an end of that era of X Comics. And then maybe to a Phoenix allusion to the rebirth out of the ashes,
right?
To what the next generation of these X stories are going to be. So CB and a handful of other Marvel people did a panel at South by Southwest this past Thursday, March 14th, to talk and tease a little bit of what's coming with X-Men. Greg?
They opened up with the 3 ongoing X-Men books that we'll be doing, which is The Uncanny X-Men by Gail Simone and David Marquez, X-Men by Jed MacKay and Ryan Stegman, and then Exceptional X-Men by Eve L. Ewing and Carmen Canero.
Yeah.
Incredible names, incredible talent for these books. It was showcased the Ryan Stegman art, which is, incredible. You've come to expect a high level of quality book from Ryan Stegman, and he delivered here with the X-Men. And then I think just after that, more books got announced, and it was like X-Force,
X-Factor,
Wolverine, Cyclops, not Storm, and Phoenix.
And Nyx.
That's right.
The book that introduced X-23.
I didn't see any creators attached to those in the stuff that I read yet.
No additional details about those books yet. So I think we're led to believe that the 3 flagship titles are going to be ongoing mainstays for, however long, at least this first era of this new edition of X books. And then these other ones, maybe miniseries, maybe ongoing, but we just don't have. We know that they're adjunct in some form or fashion.
Sure. Yeah,
they're going to be more optional reading, and I think presenting things this way, which is already in a lot of the communication of this stuff, where it's these are the 3 mainstay books, here's the other stuff that we're not getting into yet, is very much so kind of trying to reinforce the fandom of X-Men, that it's we're not going to bog you down too much, because that's been the big complaint over the Krakoan age of comics, is that people just lost themselves in the number of tie-ins, and that really important stuff is happening in X Deaths of Wolverine, but not in X Lives of Wolverine. And so what's mandatory reading and what isn't has become very confusing. And a lot of people have abandoned the X-Men comics because of that. So these 3 ongoing titles, as far as what I've been able to gather online so far anyway, is they're each going to have their own specific taste and vibe that is supposed to be something for everybody. Like, depending on what era of X-Men comics you're a fan of or what type of X comics you like, we're going to try to give you that so you can say, okay, I'm the person who ingests fun X-Men 90s cartoon style comics that I grew up with, and the stories are simple and we're fighting Sentinels and kicking the bad guy's butt, and it doesn't have to get more complicated than that. And I think that Gail Simone and Marquez's Uncanny X-Men is supposed to be that book, because it's got your Rogue, Gambit, Nightcrawler, Jubilee, Wolverine. It's set in
Louisiana, right?
It's set in New Orleans, I think. Yeah. But that's a pretty classic team and it's been regionalized, so it's maybe not going to be like a huge, like, big world comic. I think that's what I'm reading from this early anyway, is like that's going to be the comic that like is the most accessible, most just like nostalgic to millennials growing up with X-Men cartoons in the 90s, that it's like I can have simple fun with this and not have to do all the adjunct stuff.
Right.
The McKay and Stegman book has a little more obscure characters.
And
so
is it the one set in Alaska?
Yeah, this one's set in Alaska. So maybe like a little more refined X-Men taste for this one. So they're going to be battling for the destiny and philosophy of the mutant species. So this might be a book that's more for your people who are into like Immortal X-Men.
Right.
And stuff like that was a little more heady. And this team is Beast, Magneto, Psylocke, Kid Omega, Temper, who used to be Oya, who in the promo photos is like half fire power, half ice power.
Right.
One of the more, a lot of the X-Men in the promo photos have been like big mainstays. And then when I saw Oya in there, I was like, oh yeah, we've got kind of like a more obscure character. But Magic and Juggernaut are going to be in that group. So we've still, in our X universe, we've still got a lot of our heavy hitters and characters that were like at least referenced in the cartoons.
Yeah.
That maybe fans know a little less about, and they're using that as like, here's your next tier up. And then Ewing and Carnero's Exceptional X-Men it sounds kind of like a Generation X New Mutants, kind of like younger team being shepherded or like mentored by Kitty Pryde, who is another character that's always kind of been associated with those younger Team X books. That one's in Chicago, and we've got New Young Mutants, Bronze, Axo, and Melee. And then we've also got Emma Frost guiding those mutants, so something from those recent comics with her working at like the Xavier Institute and teaching kids. Sorry, I'm so excited about this stuff. I realized I've just been like vamping on what I've heard for the last 10 minutes, and this is maybe not as interesting to everybody as it is to me, but I'm extremely excited about it.
This is breaking X news.
I think these books do sound very accessible at first blush, and it does sound like they're structuring them in a way where you can get what you want out of X-Men, and if you want it all, great. It still might be easier than Krakoa was to follow, even if you're buying all the stuff. Like, I'm somebody who bought all the Krakoa stuff, and I still had my times where I was like, wait, what's going on with this title? And
well, they're not starting with a Moira storyline where there's 10 universes or 10 timelines they have to weave into one, so already on good footing.
Yep. I know, yeah. The whole timeline breaking thing was, and it's wild how much hype a comic that, like, when you think of House of X and Powers of 10, that they really broke the format of X-Men and said, hey, what are the X-Men going to be like in 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years? And then like that was it was like the headiest lead in to something. And it's like, man, just the intro is confusing for a lot of readers, right?
Yeah.
But I think I knew right away that it was like, I kind of love this convoluted X-Men shit. And I was all in on the House and Powers era of X-Men, which became the Krakoan age.
The Krakoan age.
But equally excited for this. I think my brain needs a little bit of a breather, and that's what like a lot of people feel, and that's what Marvel is giving us right now.
Hell yeah. I saw a cool little detail that after 61 years and 700 comics, Gail Simone is Uncanny X-Men's first solo female writer.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, a little troubling, but I'm glad that it's cool.
That is cool. I cannot believe that.
I know.
Louise Simonson never solo wrote Uncanny X-Men?
I don't think so.
I guess not. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, you go, Gail Simone.
Go and get it.
Go and get it.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I love her. These creative teams are like, I'm very excited about. Part of me was worried that they were going to lean into like the old head route and do like way more of like a back to basics with the X-Men in a way that was like, we're finding some classic creators and having them go back to their stuff. But I'm excited to see that there's some, voices and talent that are more our age.
Yeah, I mean, they're really starting out on a strong foot here as far as their new From the Ashes initiative.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see that Nyx was part of this, just because it's like that book can be weird.
It has to be weird. It can't be anything but.
And yeah, like having new talent on a book like that, or maybe someone who's just like brings far out ideas to the table. Like that's just going to be a fun book to have around in the X universe. So all good things. I'm really excited out of this event, and the trailer got me kind of hyped too. It definitely, like, as much as I say this seems like maybe they're gearing up for something that's much more accessible, it definitely read as something that's not going to be really light fare. Like, the implications and the tonality of it seems a little heavy based on the trailer.
Right.
So we're still dealing with the themes of, like, hate and bigotry and, the eradication of a certain type of people.
I think that will always be.
Yeah.
That will never go away. But it's not as data fueled as the Hickman stuff.
Yeah, right.
There won't be any emails that I have to go through, or dossiers, or anything like that.
All right, are we good on X-Men?
Oh, yeah.
Anything else to say?
No. I'm ready to get into the comic books that I read this week.
All right, can I mention one last thing that I wanted to shout out?
If you must. If you cannot hold back.
I looked at the cover price report, which does like a top 10 every week of comics spiking in value.
Mm-hmm.
And I noted that 6 out of the top 10 books on the list are Marvel's new Ultimate series.
Oh. Look
So,
at that.
I mean, Marvel's killing it and giving fans what they want out of that stuff. And I just read the 2 first issues of Ultimate Spider-Man, which had been in my box for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I was kind of like eye-rolling a little bit of like, oh, we're doing this whole Ultimate Universe thing.
Right.
And like, I can't buy, 2 different mainline Spider-Man titles, but woo, great book.
Looks like I'm going to be.
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of other fans are finding that too.
Yeah.
Or, there's so much hype surrounding this, you would assume that there are a lot of people who are just like, this is a good onboarding point for me for a legacy book that's been like really hard to find an entry point back into, and I can do it with this Ultimate stuff, which I think is their intention. So like, this is the year to me, at least with like the reboot of X-Men and all these Ultimate comics coming out. This is the Marvel's year of accessibility and in inviting new people in, which is cool to see, and it's great to see like such positive reactions to that sort of stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't want now. Let me say, I don't want that to happen all the time, every year, right? Like, we can easily get into reboot fatigue, and feeling.
Well, I think
like
they fell into that 5 years ago.
They did, yeah. Where you feel like nothing matters. It's you got to find the right balance and cadence of saying like, hey, you're investing a lot of your time and money into the stories we're telling, and we're gonna deliver a great experience out of that. And tell you a full and complete story.
Yeah. To be honest, though, this doesn't feel like a reboot to me, because we saw a rise and fall of an empire with the Hickman stuff, and now really what we're seeing is the fallout and the rise from that. So I feel like it's just a continuation, but we just have a different director, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's right. It's not forget that the Krakoa stuff ever happened. It's here's what happens. Post Krakoa,
and I love that, and I think that is exactly how it's supposed to be.
Yes, I do. That is a very frustrating thing for me when I've been a loyal reader of something for a long time, and then the new creative team on it says, "Forget the last 200 issues," and I'm like, "Oh,
yeah."
Like, those are integral to like who I am as a person and a collector and a reader, and it's like that. I base so much of my like pop culture identity out of like my love for these certain things that it's really hard when people say, oh, pshaw, like none of that matters to us anymore.
The biggest example I can give to that was the shift between, it was either the shift between Marvel Now into Marvel Legacy or flip-flopped, but there was such a hard line in between those two initiatives. It felt like almost like two different universes, like how they approached it. And I was like, holy, like I got whiplash from it all.
I remember being upset when the Sam Neill Wade run of Daredevil ended, and then Charles Soule took over. And at the end of Sam Neill and Wade's run, everyone knew who Matt Murdock was. And then the first issue of the Daredevil series, no one knew Daredevil's secret identity. And I was just like, what happened to the last 200 comics I read in this run? Like, you just threw that away? And ultimately, we got some explanation and all that good stuff. But it was not the best onboarding experience for me into a new thing, because it didn't feel like they were taking all the time investment I put into a thing to heart.
Well, yeah, it sucks like when a new creative team comes in and was just like, hey, delete that other shit you just read. We're doing something new. It's just like, no, man, like, build off what I just read and loved. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. But I understand what you meant there.
Big agree. Let's talk comics. Comic books.
All right, I'll go first with one of mine. I read Napalm Lullaby by Rick Remender and Bengal, out on Image Comics, and Remender's imprint Giant Generator. This is like a post-apocalyptic world, dystopian future where religious leaders have a lot of insight, and there is technology and magic, and it all lives together in one. And the little blurb in the back said that Rick Remender's been like writing the story for a couple years now, and it really shows, because everything in this book is fleshed out, and you get a lot of action. You get a lot of parallels to things that are happening in our world right now, as far as religious zealots and rewriting the narrative of history to what you think it should be. And infants that power mechs, like, things that we deal with in our day-to-day.
Yeah.
And so the art by Bengal in this is phenomenal. Per par for the course for him. I've never seen a bad issue of a comic from this creator. The leads are these two individuals who are trying to gain these like religious icons to get them into like a holy city to kill the god that lives there, because we are led to believe, and I'm sure we'll find out as the story goes on, that the religious zealots who worship this god have ruined the surrounding area, made it harder for people to live, have taken all the money and resources and put it into the holy city where the richest and most privileged people can live. And so they're going there to kill this god and maybe redistribute some of the wealth and resources.
Can I talk about how good Rick Remender is for a second?
Go off, King.
All right. We've got a new series coming out in May called Grommets.
Mm-hmm.
He's got Holy Roller going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Napalm Lullaby going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And Sacrificers.
Yes.
So 4 subsequent independent comics at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, even though Grommets hasn't come out, Napalm Lullaby sounds awesome. It's an ongoing.
It is.
You're going to get a big, sweeping, dystopian kind of epic from Remender, which we know he does so well. If you haven't read Low, I mean, big recommend from me. That's a really cool comic. Collected in 2 large hardbacks that are very affordable for what they are.
Yeah.
You can find them on sale cheap. But man, he kills everything he writes. And
he's
so
one of these storytellers that does not go into a story without a complete idea of what he wants to do.
Oh, yeah, the
and I think it's because he
tonality of
respects the reader.
Yeah, the world building, the vibe that gets set up is just so cemented.
Yeah.
By the time you're finished with the first issue, that you feel immersed in a world that's like unique to this thing, and you've already invested yourself in some sort of character.
Yeah.
And I mean, I like Low is one of those examples of books where, like, you know, not to give anything away, but like what you think you know, your expectations for like the leads, like that can change. But he's already, even though that stuff is in flux and really dynamic and changing and isn't your typical story structure, he's still doing things that feel really accessible right away, and you can cannonball into this new world and get really excited about it over the course of a first issue. And he's really inclined to do those big double-length first issues that help get you stoked and excited about something because you've got enough time to like soak it in without ads breaking up the individual comics. You've just got like, however big those are, what are they, like 72 pages?
They're huge.
You got like 72 pages of comics.
They're incredible intro books to the stories he wants to tell. And I mean, it's just, I read 3 comics this week. All 3 are spectacular, but this Remender book was so fleshed out, and like, you knew exactly what the world was. You knew exactly who the characters were, and like the action sequences were like orchestrated perfectly, and like the hook at the end, you're just like, fuck, like I'm in. Like, just give my paycheck to Giant Generator, because every book on this fucking imprint is so good.
I love it.
So big recommend.
All right, let's do Backseat Forthseas.
Ooh, I love that.
All right, so I am going to talk about Helen of Wyndhorn.
Tom King.
That's a Tom King book out on Dark Horse, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's with Bilquis Elvey.
Yes.
This is the team who worked on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow together. So like
already expectations are
a team that wrote one of the best superhero comics of the last 10 years. I mean, that maxi series of 12 issues was fantastic. Big recommend on the collected edition if you're into superhero stuff and haven't checked that out yet. This book is less superhero, but does deal in the realm of fantasy a bit. Really liked it. It's something that tiptoes you into the vibe and the storyline and what's going on, and then kind of hits you with the hammer in like the last couple pages. Generally, the synopsis is, or that I wrote real quick, was a famous writer passes away in 1930s. I think America. I'm not quite sure on that. And is survived by a 16-year-old daughter who is Helen of Wyndhorn. Her grandfather sends for her, who's someone she's never met before. And it turns out she comes from extreme wealth, right? So she's been gallivanting around with her like genius father who has this like cult following for being this prolific writer at such a young age. And when he dies young, she kind of rediscovers her family history. And so at the end of this comic, she's poised to learn a lot more about who she is and where she came from. And, you know, without giving much away, it seems like there's something a little, I don't know.
Otherworldly? Fantastical?
Otherworldly and fantastical about her family. I would say recommended if you like Harry Potter. Recommended if you like Hellboy. I think being like a period piece that kind of deals with like the mystical and otherworldly is like, it definitely gave me a Hellboy vibe.
Cool.
But a little more of that like adolescent fun Harry Potter taste to it. So really cool book that
fuck yeah,
I think is a good recommend for people who are like maybe into fantasy but not necessarily like full-blown superhero stuff,
or just like a new approach to fantasy that they think they're familiar with.
Yeah, sure.
Which Tom King does so well. Like I don't know who the fuck this guy thinks he is, writing such amazing stories all the goddamn time. like pump the brakes every once in a while, Tom. Like you've earned a little bit of rest, but I know that he's just gonna keep going forever and ever. He's just like, I'm a story machine. What can I say?
And the art's fantastic. And if you're a Bilquis Elvey fan, that goes without saying. But if you're somebody who's not intimidated by picking up a single first issue of a comic, you know, the things we're talking about today aren't trades or anything yet. They're just single issues. Mm-hmm. I think that's worth the price of admission just to, you know, guffaw at the beauty of the
gawk.
First issue. Yeah, gawk.
If you want to gawk at a comic book, go pick this one.
Gawk was the word I was looking for.
Gawkers wanted.
Yep.
The next book I read was I Heart Skull Crushers out on Boombox. This is a book that's like, okay, so if you were like a over-caffeinated kid in the 90s who stayed up too late to watch Toonami and like and practice your like Kamehameha positions and technique, like this is the book for you. We always talk about how like books are like manga influenced or like to try to like, you know, lean into that. Yeah. This is, for all intensive purposes, an American manga. Like there is no getting around the influences of this book. It's about a young girl who lives in another dystopian future where to gain like water is like a currency in this world, and the big draw of this book is so Skull Crusher is like a athlete in like a very specific hyper violent sport in this world, and this young girl who we are following wants to like be in one of these leagues that is like kind of like a mixture of soccer and polo, and you use like a Harley Quinn hammer. Like it's very much like this exaggerated made up sport for this world. And this first issue is just about introducing you to the character, her trying to get like a team together, and all the wackiness that she encounters. Like she meets these fantastic array of characters that have different personalities. They're drawn beautifully. And it's just like if you are into Toonami, if you're into anime, and if you're into manga, like this book is right up your alley, and I cannot, recommend it enough. It's by Josie Campbell, who did
Oh yeah, why do I
DC's
know that
Amazon's Attack.
Okay.
And then it is drawn by Alessio Zono, who did Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and TMNT stuff.
Okay, rad.
And so this team, just really knocked it out of the park as far as like tonality, fun. Like this book is like a ton of fun. It's out on Boombox, so that's where they put their kind of YA teen stuff. And it's like that's the perfect audience for this book is like kids who are now leaning very hard into manga are going to really gravitate towards this book, I think.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, I would say a lot of Boombox comics. One of the things that like is a bummer to me about the presentation of Boombox is that like while it is like, hey, a signifier of like, hey, this is a safe space for like young teenagers to buy comics and get a story maybe that resonates with those values and is maybe has safer subject matter for kids. There are some amazing comics on Boombox that I enjoy that definitely don't feel like they're pandering to children. You know what I mean? And
Right.
A lot of times when you see an imprint that appears to be like, oh, this is for like kids or teens, you know, and you walk into your comic shop and you're just like, oh, that looks intriguing, but I don't want to pick that up because I'm an adult. I'm a big boy.
I don't want people to make fun of me. I'll get this online.
Don't do yourself a disservice. Yeah, pick this up. Even if you have to feel like you have to buy it online, get it. There's a lot of awesome Boombox comics that I've loved over the years, and I'll say too, as a collector, I know that's not the spirit of this podcast.
These things are worth money.
Yeah, the spirit of this podcast, it's not a collector's podcast, it's a reader's podcast, right?
Yes, yeah.
And we don't like to indulge too much in like speculative value conversation, but a lot of times when you get into these things that are a younger audience, they create these formative stories for people that later on, or 5-10 years from now, they weren't printed in mass because they were for a younger audience, and now they've been turned into cartoons or movies or
Yeah, like Lumberjanes and
something that really sticks with
Backstagers.
people. Yeah, that nostalgia stuff comes back for them, and these end up being like huge, first appearances for things that become larger pop cultural things. So, I mean, just giving you a little bit of like collector's mind incentive to check out more cool comics and support more.
Yeah. Don't be scared away by the age restriction because they're all fun.
Right on. All right. Thanks for that great recap, Greg. All right. We couldn't get away without doing one Big Two book. So I read Black Widow and Hawkeye #1, which is a 1 of 4.
Okay.
Quick little mini series by Stephanie Phillips and Paolo Vianelli. In this issue, Hawkeye has killed the foreign minister of Russia. We get that out of the way right out of the gate. This is not a big spoiler or anything. So he's being hunted by not only like the U.S. military, because this was like they
didn't get to make the kill.
a minister to Russia, but you've also got Russian assassins coming after Hawkeye. And so Natasha's trying to track him down and figure out what the deal was. Like in comics all the time, this stuff is like, I was framed, or like,
mistaken identity.
Turns out dude was Ultron, and
I was a Skrull. Give me a break.
Or something like that. But this one ended with some like, interesting dynamics that were maybe a little more outside the box of Hawkeye more or less admitting to being like, yeah, I did it. Like this is not a case of like, hey, did he, didn't he, like, or why?
Just got a case of the bloodlust. Sorry.
Yeah, he was just like, yeah,
he had to go.
I fucking killed this guy. And then
And you know what, Natasha? It felt good.
and Natasha
felt
was
good.
like, "Well, I'm sure your motives were good, blah blah blah. Like I've got your back on this." And then they had this conversation that was really cool to see. That was like, "Hey, we fall back in this pattern all the time, you and me, where we don't have a close relationship, but when one of us is in the shit, the other one pops up out of nowhere and says, 'Hey, I've got your back no matter what.' And then we disappear and don't have a meaningful relationship outside of like feeling obligated to saving each other." And I thought that was like an interesting
No, I love that.
dynamic to bring up between the two, to be like, hey, there's something more personal below the surface here that we're not addressing, and this relationship between us is kind of unhealthy. On top of that, we've got the addition of, if you haven't been reading Venom, the Black Widow now has a symbiote suit a la Venom. And that's been something that's really cool to see, that it wasn't just like a 3-4 issue stunt thing in Venom.
So is the symbiote like talking to Natasha? Like just like, oh my God, it's Hawkeye.
Yeah, it's like any other symbiote
Cool.
in comics. So yeah, the whole we, like being one with something sort of thing.
We are Widow.
It's cool to see Natasha with that going on outside of the context of a Venom book. So we're seeing a little bit more of those like personal ramifications of becoming one with a symbiote suit, and Clint or Hawkeye is not totally keen on the idea of his old bestie, being influenced by this thing or being part of another. So they've set up a little bit of like tensions early on with like what that could be. And so I think we've got like a cool Mission Impossible crossed with like traditional Avengers kind of political thriller here with some like relationship dynamics. It does seem like a really cool book, and Stephanie Phillips has never let me down, and every book we've talked about up to this point has it's like really rad creatives that are doing really rad stuff. So
I will trust every Stephanie Phillips book till the ends of the world. Like, she's never let me down, ever.
She's an automatic buy for me, at least on first issues, and then I'll budget allowing, I'll decide whether I need to pick up the rest of the series. But this is
like
one I think I'm going to
that
finish.
Cosmic Ghost Rider mini that she wrote like a year ago had no business being as good as it was.
Well, this is the thing that surprises me with her. Book after book is like something will come out and I'll be like, I can't believe Stephanie Phillips wrote that. She writes a lot of like weird little one-shots and miniseries. When she's someone you associate with like large ongoing series. Like she's that good of a writer that these people normally take bigger titles for longer periods of time.
Right.
And so I'm always missing Stephanie Phillips stuff on accident, because these books just seem like, it's just like an optional reading thing. And then I'm like, oh shit, someone I really love wrote that.
God damn it.
What did I do?
The last book I read, if I may go next.
Please do.
Is a book called Little Black Book, out on AWA, by Jeff McComsey, who did ETER, if you remember.
ETER?
It's about a hospital on a space station where they operate on aliens as they come in.
Oh, that's cool. I've never heard of that, I don't think.
And then Grendel, Kentucky.
Oh, yeah, I like that book.
And then the artist on there is Felipe Chuha, who did Gatsby. And then a couple other small indie stuff. But essentially what this book is, Little Black Book, is about a man who lives in a trailer park with his wife. One day they're visited by a lawyer who has said that his father has passed away. The father and son have been estranged for over 20 years. And the lawyer says, well, your dad left you a house out in Arizona. And, being down on his luck, the son's just like, okay, I guess we'll go live in this house now. And as they're living there, they find like a leak in the ceiling. So the son's like fixing that, and he finds a burner cell phone and a little black book with a bunch of names on it. And some of them say cleaner or like, helper or fixer or stuff like that. And so the son's just like, I should not have this book. This is like a definite, like, and he knew his dad was like a shitbag. Like, always in the mix with bad characters. That's why he left the family. So this guy knows that his dad is always up to no good. And so, they flash forward like 6 months, and the man is awoken in the middle of the night by his wife calling him saying that she has hit someone with her car and she doesn't know what to do, right? And so the guy's like, don't call anyone. I'm headed there right now. And he pulls out from the drawer the little black book, and he calls someone in the book. It's just like, I need help. Like, and like these helpers come to this son's aid. They take care of the body. They take care of they take care of everything. And the guy's like, okay, how do I pay you? And they're just like, don't worry, we'll send the invoice to the company we usually do. And the son's like, oh, fuck, like, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah.
And so we're going to find out as the story goes, like, what is this company? Who is in this little black book? Like, the people that showed up were dressed as, like, a tow truck driver and a cop. Yeah. And the guy dressed as a cop was just like, listen, we have to hurry up because, people driving by will say, oh, that's a cop. But if a real cop drives by or like an off-duty, like, volunteer firefighter, they will recognize I'm not a cop, and then more people are going to end up in this trunk. So we need to hurry it along.
Right.
And so I love that idea of like a secret network of like quote-unquote fixers is like at the beck and call of this dude now. And now he has to probably pay up for what he did for calling in a helper. Like now he probably has to go help someone. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
The implications of all this is very riveting. AWA is so good at this, at these little tiny like drama, small town issues, bubbling under the surface kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I love it. Like, it's in Arizona, so it's like sparse landscapes with a lot of red and yellow hues, and it was a very cool book.
That's one thing I appreciate about AWA and a lot of independent publishers is like knowing I'm going to get a story with a beginning and end. And then it's gonna like happen in 6 issues, and it's like low commitment money, like monetarily, and really fun story that like doesn't have to like stretch out forever and ever.
Mm-hmm. I will say right now it's mapped out to 3 issues. I don't know if it's going to go longer than that. But
okay, wow, easy.
Yeah. And there's some of the variant covers is like one is a Raising Arizona homage, and the other one's like a Fargo homage. So like they're definitely leaning into the like underbelly world of communities and towns and stuff like that. So I really, really enjoyed it.
I love it. Awesome.
Oh, it's a 1 of 4. Sorry, just saw it right here.
Okay. Nice. Well done. Good on you, AWA. Yes.
I sometimes Vargas always loves AWA books, and like sometimes I've never read a bad one. I'll say that for sure. But for whatever reason, this one really connected. Of just like some schmuck, in a fit of panic, called this number, and now he has to deal with the ramifications of it. And it's like, it's very much, and this is not it, but it feels like a Death Note thing of just like, God damn it, I shouldn't, like a Pandora's box, like I shouldn't have even opened it. Now I have no idea what I'm in for or what my family's in for. So that's all I got for this time.
Well, I think that does it then for another week of the First Issue Club. Get well soon, Vargas, if you made it this far into listening to your own podcast.
Hope you're drinking your chicken noodle soup or eating your Tylenol.
NyQuil. Just mix your NyQuil with your chicken noodle soup.
Yep.
And we'll see you all next week. Stay tuned for the outro to get all our details on Patreon and socials and more.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.